everybody, and welcome back. Good to have you here on The Latte Show. And my guest tonight is acclaimed phonetician, phonologist, language coach, polyglot, and YouTuber. You know him for his work on African languages, How to Talk Like a Pirate, and most recently as the star of the Polyglot Billionaire, Dave Huxtable. Welcome to The Latte Show.
Dave, welcome. It is such a pleasure to have you here with us.
It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. So, Dave, many people first met you in the Polyglot Billionaire. Can you tell us what is a polyglot? Yeah, there's no standard definition of a polyglot. I mean, we've got words like monolingual is someone who only speaks one language, bilingual, someone who speaks two, trilingual, three. But then I suppose beyond that, you start getting polyglot. But I mean, there's no standard minimum number of languages you have to speak or minimum level that you have to speak them at. There's no governing body institution that says you are or you aren't. So for me, it basically means someone who has a passion for languages, someone who enjoys learning languages, and that's it really.
When did you first know you were one?
Yeah, I don't even remember. My mum tells the story of when I was 3 years old. My granddad came round, and my grandparents lived just round the corner, and he found me on the floor in front of the TV watching a BBC language learning program. And he said, he was a Cockney speaker, he said, "What are you making the poor little kid watch that for?" And my mum said, "You try and see what happens if you turn it off." And then that kind of continued. So the BBC used to have these programs on Sunday mornings. There was a whole string of, I can't remember what they were all called, but there was Buongiorno Italia, there was Dígame, which was for learning Spanish, and then they would end up with a program called Naya Zindagi Naya Jivan, which they used to say, now a program for Asian viewers. And that wasn't for learning Hindustani, it was for Hindustani speakers to watch the news, and there was entertainment, there was music, and I used to watch that too, and just kind of, enjoy being washed over by these sounds. And then as I got older, that interest was maintained. I used to go to the local library, and they had a shelf full of books for learning languages, so I remember getting out like Teach Yourself Japanese, which, and often, we're talking about late 60s, early 70s, and many of these books were written in the end of the 40s, 50s, so they were very old-fashioned. Some of them were just, I think Teach Yourself Russian just started off with, these are nouns. These are masculine nouns, learn them. These are lesson 2, these are feminine nouns, learn them. And then eventually you got to learn how to say, my old mother is in the garden, which my mum didn't like. She wasn't old. And I remember the Japanese one, it started off with not so many great, in fact, very little vocabulary in that one. But it did start off with the difference between ga and wa as particles. And one of the example sentences was pen ga arimasu. Pen ga arimasu, which means, according to them, the pen exists. Which is kind of an odd thing to want to say. I found out much more recently that actually that's kind of a perfectly normal way of saying, I've got a pen.
No, the pen exists. The pen does not exist. The paper exists. The pen does not exist.
And when I was 11, I started studying French at school, and that was all about where animals are and stuff. And also German, so French at 11, German at 13. And I carried on, with this interest in going to the library, reading about other languages, following the languages on the BBC. There was a good one that started maybe when I was about 14 or 15 that was called Russian Language and People. So we're still talking Soviet times here. And it was a collaboration between the BBC and Soviet television. It was presented by a hairdresser who was living the Soviet dream. She had been plucked from obscurity and made into a TV host and newsreader, and she was the anchor of this program. And so this woman used to go around the streets of Moscow asking people incredibly obvious things. So, for example, she would stand in front of a metro station and say, "Скажите, пожалуйста, где метро?" Like, excuse me, where's the metro station? And people would look at her as if she was slightly crazy and then say, "Вот метро." Occasionally, she would pull Cyrillic letters from her handbag and say, This is the letter D. It is pronounced D. Soviet children learn this alphabet very, very easily. So there you go, very easy.
So you're a British accent meister living in California. Are you ever worried that you might lose your accent?
No, I don't think I will ever lose my accent. I pretty much keep tabs on it. I know where it is at all times. I'm never like kind of, did I leave it in the restaurant?
It sounded like you were losing it in Polyglot Billionaire.
Yes, I did, and that was a deliberate choice.
You've also been criticized for some of the sounds you recommended in that video.
Yes, that's right. So I had said that the Welsh sound was one of my favourites, and someone wrote and said that was the ugliest sound on earth, which I thought was rather unfortunate.
How could they? Poetry in spittle.
Indeed. Yeah, and there was that too. They then went on to say that they said it was dangerous at in these times, which, I mean, one, if you are in danger of spreading the virus, you should be wearing a mask and it should be covering your mouth and your nose. Go figure.
Both orifices, all three outlets.
And secondly, I don't think that if you're doing right, it involves any more projection of aerosol than any other sound. Definitely safer than a bilabial roll.
Bilabial rolls. Is that a new kind of sushi?
A roll or a trill is when you build up pressure behind a floppy bit of your vocal tract and then allow it to kind of vibrate. So think whoopee cushion, or even what whoopee cushion is trying to imitate. So examples are, for example, the French the sound that you get in Spanish, Italian, Russian, etc., etc. And then this one, the bilabial version, is much rarer, but it involves the same process of building up pressure behind the lips and then letting them flap about. So,
People actually say that in words.
It's not very common, but it does exist in the world's languages. So the word for dog in the Medumbu language of Western Cameroon is mbru. Indeed. And there are two languages in Sichuan province in southwestern China, the Lizu and Pumi languages, where this sound can act almost like a vowel, and it also carries kind of tone, intonation. So, for example, the Lizu word for bean is tbr, and Pumi for to dig is pr. So that was brr. There's also a voiceless version. There's a language called Warit, which is spoken on the border of Chile and Bolivia, where the word for chicken is poe.
When I am next there, chicken is off the menu. What can I order instead?
Yeah, you might be better off with fish. That's wham.
Wham. I can say that. Yeah, I can say that. Give me the wham. No wham. You work very hard to tell people about languages, to share your fascination. What message are you trying to get across?
Yeah, so I think three things. It's easier than people think. It's fun and enjoyable, and it's actually good for you. So I think one of the reasons that people think it's more difficult than it is, and this is not to criticize language teachers, but often, when you're teaching a language, the only thing you can test is vocabulary and grammar rules, especially in the US where they're very sensitive about bias in testing. So they want to eliminate any kind of human judgment in what grades you get, and it all tends to be marked by machines. It's very, very difficult to do unless you're saying, put the right word in this sentence, which is pretty dull and actually not very useful, and not the way that people learn languages, in my opinion. Now, the fun part is really enjoyable to speak in another language, not just because you can communicate with people that you wouldn't be able to otherwise unless you went through an interpreter or something. And, the languages themselves are all rich and diverse, and there are things to discover about them and different ways of seeing the world. It was interesting. A friend of mine, I was going to Iceland, and someone said, well, you don't need to learn Icelandic because everyone there speaks English. And for me, that's like saying, well, you're going to Thailand, but you don't need to eat any Thai food because there's McDonald's. It's the pleasure. I mean, actually, there's more pleasure in speaking Icelandic than there is in eating Icelandic food. Not that I tried very much, actually, because I'm a vegetarian, so unfortunately, I wasn't able to try such delicacies as the rotting shark marinated in urine, or the deep-fried puffins, or the whale meat, or anything like that. The language is fabulous. It's got lots of Old Norse grammar that survived, some fabulous words where, they create any new word for something new that comes in, they create it out of the traditional kind of Old Norse stock of vocabulary. So that's wonderful. And then as far as it being good for you goes, research shows that speaking more than one language on a regular basis can offset the effects and delay the effects of various neurological conditions, for example, various kinds of dementia. So that can't be bad.
So what's next?
What's next? I'm going to continue making videos about language and language learning and phonetics and phonology and whatever else takes my fancy. Yes, so I don't really know what's next, but if people subscribe and click the bell icon, then they'll find out.
Well, thank you, Dave Huxtable. Thanks you for being here, and we'll see you again soon. Goodbye.